meeting of the Starkville Board of Alderman will now come to order. Please rise for the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance to be followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, you have before you a copy of the modified written agenda, and I've got a couple of modifications before I open it for the board. First of all, the city attorney has informed me that item 10A, the first matter under board business, consideration of vacating the plat as Starkville Land Subdivision plat dated 1954 is requested property owner Mississippi State University. Is procedurally defective. That matter needs to be pulled from the agenda. Is there any objection? Any objection to pulling matter number 10A from the agenda? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been pulled from the agenda. And I also have a clarification from the city engineer on his first request tonight. That matter needs to be restated as a request for approval of Louisville Street widening and pedestrian project and authorization to advertise for bids contingent on approval or modifications of the PS&E assembly from MDOT and contingent upon approval from MDOT to advertise. Now that matter is on consent agenda. It will remain on consent agenda until somebody pulls it off. Is there any objection to the modification in the wording of that matter?
Mr. Mayor, I object. And the reason I object, this is, you said a mouthful, and I just got here, hadn't heard it before. Let the engineer come out and explain what's that all about.
Okay, can we modify the wording?
Oh, yeah,
and
modify
take
the
it
wording.
off of consent?
Take it off consent, modify,
Okay.
let him come down and explain. This is too much to digest in 60 seconds.
So item 11F1 will be modified as I just read it and will be taken off of the consent agenda.
Mayor, can you repeat that, please?
All right. The language should be changed to request approval of Louisville Street widening and pedestrian project and authorization to advertise for bids contingent upon approval or modifications of the PS&E assembly from MDOT and contingent upon approval from MDOT to advertise. Does anybody need that repeated again? Anybody need that repeated again? All right. So that is the matter as it stands off of the consent agenda. Now do we have any proposed revisions from the members of the board? Alderman Dibble.
I've got several to be added to consent. Under board business, item G, add to consent with Bill Poe and Emily Jones going back on the Heritage Museum board and Dalton McAlpin going back on the library board to consent.
All right, so the proposed revision is to place item 10G, the appointments to the Oktibbeha County Heritage Museum for the 2 terms ending 9/30/2014. Those appointments being Bill Poe and Emily Jones, and the appointment of Dalton McAlpin to the County Library Board for the term ending on 9/30/2016. The proposed revision is to place that matter as stated on the consent agenda. Alderman Dimmons, that's your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I have any objections? Any objections? Any objections? Any objections? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Any further proposed revisions?
Under consent, I'd like to, under building codes and planning, item 3 to consent.
right, the proposed revision is to place item 11B3, a resolution to adjudicate the cost of demolition, cleaning, and care of a dilapidated property by the Code Enforcement Division, allowing the city attorney to enroll assessments against the property located at 514 Mississippi Highway 182 West, Dr. MLK Jr. Drive, identified as parcel number 118N-00-131.00 in accordance with Section 21-19-11 of the Mississippi Code as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda.
I've got several under personnel. Do I need to take these one by one, or can I take them all at the same?
Let's take them one by one.
Item 1 under personnel to consent.
The proposed revision is placing the advertisement for the vacant position of Support Tech 2 for the Starkville Police Department as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Davis, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda.
Item 2 under personnel to consent.
The proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to place the approval of the advertisement to fill vacant positions for certified police officers in the police department as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Any objection? Any objection? Is that an
Just a
objection?
question, how many positions is that?
6, I believe.
Are
Chief,
these
is it
still
6? Yeah.
6?
6,
Are these still tied in with some that we lost to the Highway Patrol School?
yes. And others. Is there any objection? Any objection to the proposed revision? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Do we have any further proposed revision?
Under personnel, item 3 to consent.
All right. Alderman Dumas has proposed revising the agenda to place the hire of Chris Pullum for the position of engineering aide for the Starkville Electric Department on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Do we have
Under personnel, item 8 to consent.
8?
Yes.
All right, Alderman Dumas has proposed revising the agenda to place the hire of Willie Brooks for Maintenance Worker 1 in the Water Division of Public Services as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, do you have further proposed revision?
Item 9 to consent under personnel.
All right, Alderman Dumas has proposed revising the agenda to place the approval of the advertisement to fill the vacant position of crew leader, operator in the Water Division of the Public Services Department as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda.
Under personnel, final one, number 7 to consent.
Number 7.
Yes.
All right, Alderman Dumas has proposed placing the promotion of Ellis Agnew from crew leader operator to line foreman in the Water Division of the Public Services Department as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda.
And then finally, under board business, I'd like to remove item D, consideration of calling for a public hearing on the ordinance regulating the use and location of accessory structures from the agenda.
All right, the proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is the removal of item 10D, the consideration of calling for a public hearing on an ordinance regulating the use and location of accessory structures in the city of Starkville from the agenda. Any objection to removing that matter from the agenda? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been removed from the agenda. Do we have any further proposed revisions from the members of the board? Alderman Sistrunk.
I'd like to remove from the consent agenda item 11A. 1, and I think 2 and 3 will have to come along with it because they'll be authorized under the agreement referenced in item A1, airport business.
Okay, so you're removing items 11A1, A2, and A3 from
Yes.
consent. All right, those matters will be removed from the consent agenda. Do we have any further proposed revisions?
And I would like to remove item 10F, board business. Pull that for tonight as well.
All right, Alderman Sistrunk has proposed revising the agenda to remove item 10F, consideration of calling for a public hearing on the adoption of an ordinance to address the zoning, proximity, and signage issues related to payday loan businesses within the city of Starkville. Any objection to that proposed revision? Any objection, any objection, any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been removed from the agenda. Do we have any further proposed revisions? Any further proposed revisions from the members of the board? Alderman Carver.
Mayor, under Department of Business, item B, number 2, consideration to approve P&Z item number 2, I'd like to place that on consent if possible.
I've got one question about that. I'd like to.
All right, the
hear it now.
proposed revision is to place item 11B2, the approval of P&Z item number CU 11-06, a request by Bonds of Love Ministry to allow a place of worship in a C2 zoning district located at 305 Dr. MLK Jr. Drive in Ward 5 on the consent agenda. Alderman Carver, is that your proposed revision?
Yes, it is.
Are there any conditions that go with that?
I'm going to put in. He may.
As presented. Place that matter as presented on the consent agenda. Is there any objection? And
Got an
Alderman
objection.
Jennings has a question.
I've got an objection.
Oh, okay. That matter will remain on the regular agenda. Any further proposed revisions? Are there any further proposed revisions? Any further proposed revisions? Any further proposed revisions? Seeing none, a motion to approve the agenda as revised is in order.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Corey to approve the agenda as revised. Do I hear a second? Motion's been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter before you is the approval of the consent agenda as revised. Is there any objection to the approval of the consent agenda as revised? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda as revised has been approved. There are no minutes for consideration tonight, so that will take us to comments by the mayor and board. And I have a few scheduled comments tonight. The first is a reminder to the board, and it's actually in a reminder. I don't think I've clarified this yet. We've kind of had a moving target on the date. Our capital improvement list that we worked to compile a couple of months ago with government consultants is helping us with our capital improvement plan. Need to be in by next Tuesday. Some of you have gotten them in already. If you have misplaced yours and haven't gotten it in, you do have copies at the desk. And the instructions on those are to rank items or score them A, B, and C based on how you feel about the priority they should be given. And you should try as best you can to have 45 A's, 45 B's, and 45 C's. Although I'll say if you can't make it work exactly 45, 45, 45, it's no big deal. Just try to get those back on October the 11th. And the way this will proceed from here is government consultants will aggregate the scores that you give them, and then they will be given back to you for another prioritization. And at that point, we'll have a work session to discuss where we are and how we turn this into a capital improvement plan. You will hear a presentation a little bit later tonight on the Pink Hills tour. I'm not going to steal the thunder of that presentation. I will only endorse this event as a wonderful event that I got the privilege of taking part in last year. I hope all of you that are available will take the time to attend this event. And at this time, it is my pleasure to introduce the 4 newest members of the City of Starkville workforce. First, I'd like to introduce Frank Rogers III. The City of Starkville would like to introduce Frank Rogers III as our new laborer in the Sanitation and Environmental Services Department. Frank is a native of Starkville and graduated from Starkville High. Frank is the son of Frank Rogers Jr., who most co-workers know as Flip. Flip works in the water department. Frank previously worked in construction and on a farm. He has 3 children, daughter Lamaya Rogers, sons Lamarcus and Jalen Rogers. He enjoys playing football with his children, playing with his pit bull Coco, and spending time with his girlfriend Jennifer Gray. Frank attends Plains UMC Church on Highway 389. Please join me in welcoming Frank. It is now my pleasure to introduce Marco Rodriguez, our newest member of the fire department. And Marco Rodriguez is one of our newest fire departments. Was one of our newest firefighters, excuse me. Marco is originally from Keysby, New Jersey, and is a graduate of Woodbridge High School. Marco was most recently employed as the manager of Buffalo Wild Wings. However, he previously spent 4 years as volunteer firefighter in New Jersey and 8 years as a firefighter in Minot, North Dakota. Marco and his wife, Maria, are the proud parents of 2 daughters, 10-year-old Madison and 8-year-old Megan. He also has a pug named Gracie. The family attends church at Columbus Air Force Base. During his free time, Marco enjoys playing golf, cooking, and spending time with his family. Before moving to Starkville, Marco spent 2 years living in Portugal. Please join me in welcoming Marco. I'd now like to introduce our next newest member to the addition to the fire department. James Hayes is also a new fire department. James is also a new firefighter. James is originally from Staines, Mississippi, and is a graduate of Victory Christian Academy in Columbus, Mississippi. He is a graduate of East Mississippi Community College with an Associate of Arts degree. He attended Mississippi State University for 1 year, majoring in agribusiness. Before joining the City of Starkville, James worked for the Lowndes County Farm Supply in the warehouse. James' family includes his parents, Jeff Hayes and Lisa Hayes Whitehead, his brother, John Hayes, his 2 dogs, Henry and Max, and James attends Piney Grove United Methodist Church in Staines. In his spare time, he enjoys deer and duck hunting and spending time with his girlfriend, Stephanie Lavender. James also enjoys cattle farming and is the 7th straight generation cattle farmer in his family. Please join me in welcoming James. And finally, I'd like to introduce William Brooks, the newest addition to the Starkville Electric Department. William Brooks is our new apprentice lineman in the Starkville Electric Department. He is originally from Mathiston, Mississippi, and is a graduate of Starkville Academy. William previously worked for Chain Electric, Pike Electric, and B&B Electric. On all of these jobs, he was building and repairing power lines. William's family includes his parents, Mike and Rachel Brooks, his sister, Mary Catherine Brooks, and he attends Mount Zion Baptist Church in Eupora, Mississippi. William enjoys going to the gym, hunting, especially ducks, and spending time with his family, or spending time with his fiancee, Kenzie Rice. Please join me in welcoming William. All right. That concludes my comments for the evening. We have one scheduled comment by the members of the board, and that is the recognition of our Employee of the Month by Alderman Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. This month, our Employee of the Month for the City of Starkville is Benny Gazaway. Benny is the Employee of the Month for October 2011. He is a foreman for New Construction Rehab Division of our Public Services Department. Benny has worked for the City of Starkville for almost 22 years. He is responsible for overseeing the city's sewer collection system. He can always be counted on to do his job with a smile, even in the most adverse conditions. Whether it's in the heat of the summer, cold of the winter, or a driving rain, Benny can be seen walking the collection system checking for leaks. By keeping the collection system in tip-top shape, Benny is not only saving the city operational costs by lowering electric bills, reducing wear and tear on pumps, and alleviating sewer overflow, but he is also helping to extend the life of our infrastructure. Benny also has the responsibility of inspecting new constructions to make sure the installations meet current city guidelines, which is a major long-term benefit for the city. Benny's job requires a lot of patience and diligence on his part, and he never fails to do his best. He can always be counted on to help in any situation and is always willing to pitch in and do whatever it takes to get the job done correctly. Benny is genuinely concerned for our customers and goes that extra mile to be sure that each one has a positive experience. Benny is an exceptional employee, and his knowledge, experience, attitude, devotion, and his humble demeanor make him worthy of recognition as our Employee of the Month. The City of Starkville is proud to recognize Benny Gazaway as Employee of the Month for October 2011.
All right, that concludes our scheduled comments for this evening. Do we have any further comments from the members of the board? Do we have any further comments? Any further comments from the members of the board? Seeing none, we'll now move into citizen comments. Any citizen wishing to make comments this evening may do so by coming forward, introducing yourself, and you'll be recognized to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes.
Greetings to the mayor and board. My name is Alvin Turner, Ward 7. I want to recognize Vice Mayor Sid Trump and Alderman Vaughn.
Thank you, Alvin.
Mr. Turner?
The citizens and taxpayers, we need some help. We would like for Alderman Roy Perkins and Ms. Lynn Pruitt to help. We would like to know the population that we had four years ago under Mayor Dan Campbell. We would like to know the population as of now under Mayor Wiseman. We would like to see, can we find a building for the police department, or with the empty buildings that we have around Stark, so that they can protect us and they can be protected. Now, we wouldn't want anything to happen to Marquita, because we would have to talk to John. And we wouldn't want anything to happen to any of our police officers.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Do we have any further citizen comments tonight?
Greg Oppendall, Ward 6. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Board. I'm here to address the issue of the PUD development off East Garrett Road by the Cracker Development folks. I'm in general in favor of that development because I think with PUD you can do quite a bit different things than you could do with normal development in that area, especially for that piece of land which is in a triangular shape and that would be kind of hard to develop otherwise. I do have some concerns though that project is going to be developed following city ordinances. Because I think that some of the information presented at the P&Z meeting and also with the information in UPAC has been incorrect. At the first meeting at the P&Z meeting, there was errors in the original package because it was presented as a gross density per acre when the city regulations clearly call for a net density per acre, and that's never been done that way before. That was kind of a unique change. Also, I'm kind of concerned with this revision too, because the motion went forward that we would ask them to present that as a net density per acre, and the stuff in your e-packet is clearly wrong. There's a bunch of mistakes in there and a bunch of errors and some information left out. And I'm also concerned about the fact that a lot of the stuff being presented by the city has been presented in terms of referring back to the master plan, when there's clearly city ordinances to address that. What I'm referring to, a lot of times when I read in the minutes, is I see references back to what the master plan says should be the density, and there's clearly city regulations to account for that. Going back to the zoning thing, if you go back and read the city code, back in Appendix B, Article 5, Section 6, Item 5, it clearly says the planned unit development shall indicate the proposed maximum dwelling unit density per acre, not including streets, provision for maintenance of areas set aside for streets, and common open spaces. And that has never been done yet in any of the information that you've been presented so far. If we do that, we take out the road of 1.2 acres, the common area, the detention area from 5 acres, you're ending up with the developed acres of 1.91 acres. Now, there's 23 units being proposed out there over 9.1 acres. That's 12.4 units per acre, well above the maximum allowed of 5 units, not even close to being 25% that's being allowed. That's 176% greater density than what an R1 should be. If you follow the city guidelines exactly, I mean, there's more open space there than what is really required. That means there really should only be 10 units being developed instead of the 23. Now, I realize that these are just guidelines, and in fact, if you go back and read, I think, the spirit of the guidelines, what you're really doing with the PUDs is you're giving up 25% open space in return to having 25% higher density. So in effect, you really should end up with about the same number of units that you would have with the original zoning out there. Part of the problem, though, is when you try to develop that as an R1, you already got about a half acre off for the detention area. You got about another half acre or more for roads, and you got the creek behind you, which is probably going to take about another half acre or so. So in effect, if you tried to develop that as an R1, I doubt you could get more than 12 units back there anyway as an R1s, which means that as a PUD, you probably shouldn't have that much more either. So if we go back and try to follow the directions, what the city ordinances say, I think you'll have some benefits as well. One of the problems is there's really no places to park in the current plan. And if you guys have ever driven past Louisville Street, which is also a PUD development that the Crackers have developed, I drove past there on Sunday after a football game. There were 4 trucks parked along the side of the road, not in any kind of parking spaces. You can imagine when you have about a quarter mile of road, when you have trucks like that.
Your time's expired.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any further citizen comments?
My name is Ira Lovelace. I live in Ward 7. I have the same problem, or not the same problem. I have a problem with the Cracker PUD. First of all, the applicant has not established that there's been a change in the neighborhood. There's nothing going on. From one end of Garrett to the other end, there hadn't been one shovel full of dirt moved in the last 4 years. There's a new road. A new road is only a perspective change. It is not a change in fact. So Mr. Cracker's gonna have to establish the change. I can't see it. I drove it this afternoon. I've driven it down, been down it twice today. There's no change on Garrett Road. There's no change in the area. The other thing is, this PUD going in on 5 acres is gonna be the cornerstone to a domino effect. There are over 200 acres undeveloped adjoining all this property. If this high-density PUD is allowed to go in there, it's going to be the change that's going to cascade on those other 200 acres, and I quit counting at 200. I've got the map, I've pulled the city maps and pulled it off the tax records. There are over 200 acres immediately adjacent to this one little 5 acres. And if it needs to develop something, it's being carved out of an 25 acre stretch. So why the 5 acres? It's only to get a key to open the door, and when it does, you're gonna have a density that's gonna be unbelievable. Second question, or the third question in there, I'm waiting on Mr. Devlin to present his 1998 revisions. The city still owes sewage to the west end of Starkville. So when are they gonna put the sewage in for this new PUD development on these 200 acres? I'll let Mr. Devlin explain when he's gonna put the sewage in out there, because he's already 12 years behind. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Lovelace. Do we have any further citizen comments? Any further citizen comments this evening? Any further citizen comments? Any further citizen comments? Seeing none, we'll move to public appearances. And we have 2 scheduled public appearances tonight. The first is by Mr. Turner Purnell. on the matter of creating West Side Drive as a one-way street in order to allow parking. Mr. Purnell, you may come forward, and you'll have a maximum of 10 minutes to make your presentation, and then after that, I'll ask that you remain seated for questions and comments from the members of the board.
Good evening. My name is Turner Purnell, and I'm here on behalf of my neighbors in Ward 7 at West Side Drive concerning the parking over there and not having a sidewalk, streets not wide enough. Your parking that has been taken away, visitor has been taken away from the neighbors there. We don't have any place for a visitor to park, and we're having to park on our lawn and anywhere else we can to get off the street, which is the law right now because they have placed no parking signs out there. And we are not just dwelling on the city making it out of a one-way. We're just looking for a solution, some type of solution to solve this problem, whereas that we can have visitors at our homes because we are taxpayers and we should be allowed to park somewhere. You know, either widen the street. If the street can't be wide enough, the city don't have money enough to widen the street, we thought about doing a one-way. I spoke that to the chief and he said that sounded like an okay idea. So we thought about making it out of a one-way. And if a one-way is a problem, then you need to come up with something else, whereas that we would be able to park at our home and have visitors at our home. And you also need a sidewalk there because the double lines are out there on the street. Pedestrians are walking. If my car is parked in front of my house, that means you have to pull up behind my car, cross over the yellow line, which is in a violation. My car is piled up in my yard, okay, there's nothing on the street. If kids or grown-ups or pedestrians are walking the street, you still got to cross over the yellow line to pass them because there's not a sidewalk there. So we have a problem that needs to be solved. When the cars were parked on the street, that gave pedestrians somewhere to walk and be safe about it. Since they put the yellow lines down, the speed have increased. You can't walk the street because the speeding is so fast there. Because of the yellow line, there's nothing is out there. The cars did slow other cars down when they were out there. Now we're having to park on top of each other and on our lawn, and nobody wants to park on top of their lawn like that. You know, if you can do something about this, I mean, it doesn't. If not a one way, I saw it in the paper this morning about the problem it would create if it was a one way, how many people it would hurt. But you got to consider the homeowners that's right there on that street that are paying taxes, you know, that don't have anywhere to park. You know, I have 3 kids. All of my kids have cars. My wife and I have a car. This came up once before about 7-8 years ago, and they resolved it. The mayor resolved it by putting up them no parking sign, telling us to park close to the curb. You know, and everything worked out. We haven't had an accident on that street at all. Not an accident until they repaved it, put the double lines out there, and not long ago they had one accident because the motorcycle was coming up the street too fast because the street was smooth and it's wide open. Actually, what has happened, I think, is that the street has been turned, to me, the street has been turned into a highway. It's not a street anymore. It's hard for my grandkids to get in and out of the car to get in the house, up the hill to my house, simply because the traffic is so fast. It's a flow of fast traffic at all times. The police department has been doing their job about coming out there and, you know, slowing some of it down, but I understand that they can't sit there all day, every day, and slow the traffic down. We need something to happen. Something needs to be done about being able to park at home, the flow of the traffic, parking at home, and a sidewalk. So, I mean, I'm open for any questions that you have. And I'm not just speaking on my behalf, I'm speaking on my neighbor's behalf too. The majority of my neighbors are disabled. I am disabled, but I'm the youngest disabled one that lives right there. And I'm speaking not only on my behalf, but on their behalf. Some of them couldn't be here, but I'm here to speak on their behalf. So we're asking you guys to please, you know, consider doing something about this situation, because it's not very good to not be able to receive company. I can get home, my wife can get home, but my kids can barely visit me because there's nowhere to park. And you can't go around the corner and park, because if you do, you're taking parking away from somebody else's house. So we have a problem there that needs to be solved one way or the other. You know, it don't have to be a one way, but whatever. That was just a thing that was brought up. But whatever can be done, we need it to be done so that, you know, it won't be so bad for the neighbors that are there, taxpayers that are there. And however it be done, it just need to be done, you know. Like I say, we had that problem before, and, you know, we got it wiped out without a problem. They just came out, pulled up the signs, you know. And the problem was over with.
Can I ask Mr. Purnell a couple questions?
Yep,
Just
he's
two
got actually about a minute left.
Okay.
Do you have any further
Oh,
comments?
man, no, I can answer any question you want to ask.
Okay, I've got about four.
Okay, come on
First of all, there's no driveways for these homes on West Side?
Yes, there are driveways. From the last time this happened, this came up, I dug a hole out of my yard, which caused the foundation of my house to shift right now to make parking for my wife and I to park.
Okay.
There is a driveway. We park our 2 vehicles there. Like I stated, I have 3 grown daughters that have vehicles. There's nowhere for them to park when they come.
Okay. I got 4 questions now, okay?
Come on.
So the no parking signs came when the street got repaved? This has
Right.
been within the last year or two?
The no parking signs came first, which was about, I guess, about a month ago, last month
A
sometime.
month ago? What is the speed limit on that street?
If I'm not mistaken, I think it's 20 or 25. But actually, we get traffic down through there like 45 sometime. I have even seen cars passing one another. Since the double lines are out there, nothing is out there to slow them down.
Right. And your one way that you're proposing, you're talking about coming north on Reed Road, and what would be better, you think, to be one way toward
If
the
you,
east?
I
or-
felt like if you was gonna one way it, I feel like it would be best to one way it from West Side Park down to Reed Road.
So heading west, going back out to Reed Road?
Right.
And I guess on as city engineer, is this something that you think is even feasible that we need to address, or is this more of a safety concern if we started trying to do a one-way, or how do you feel about it?
Or is it something we could study and get back to Mr. Turner?
It's something.
Can you do that?
Okay. Take a look at that, see how many, one thing to look at is how many, change the flow of traffic, how many houses or homes or businesses will be affected by that.
Alderman Vaughn?
Ms. Sproul, you're gonna be in on that and be able to give us a report on the next meeting to see what we can do, restudy this and see what can we do. Because I understand, because I be over there all the time, I understand, there's no sidewalks there. And developing, when the development did that, that's what come from the development, when they developed that area. That's not only there, it's in some more areas. But I appreciate if y'all could restudy that and try to come up with an answer for the next board meeting. Mr. Parnell, the rest of it, would I please y'all, we try to come up with something in the next board meeting, have some kind of answer for you.
That would be good. We're just looking, you know, for some type of solution. It's not to put anybody in a bind or anything. It's just to be able to come home and be able to park at home. Matter of fact, my wife was just up here yesterday to pay a ticket that was put on her car for parking at home.
Chief, what is the speed limit there, Chief? Can you recall? 20?
Do we have any further questions
I
or
got one
comments?
more. Chief, I got a question. Meantime, can we do anything about these tickets till we get this studied? How many tickets have been issued?
Several. It was at the request of residents, and I think yourself.
Yeah, I did call, but I called about that speeding.
And we did that, and I don't think we've written any
For
tickets
parking?
to anybody that was not doubling the speed limit.
Okay, that's what I call for
And no way
speeding.
we can allow parking there without enforcing it, because it causes people to cross the double yellow line. And, I mean, we're in a impossible situation where it is now.
The only ticket that was, like I said, the ticket that was issued for no parking, as far as I know, was to my wife's car, and that ticket has been paid. So, you know, we won't worry about that. You know, that was done without a warning or anything before we even knew the sign was there. You know, after the sign was put up.
Do we have any further questions? Alderman Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, just want to join in with the request by Alderman Vaughn, who represents that ward in question. Ms. Sproul, I'm going to join in for the urgency of this. If you give us that recommendation at the next meeting as to what you think is viable to accommodate this volatile situation, and hopefully, you know, y'all can come back to the next meeting to, in case you can have some input under the citizens to come in and maybe we may know ahead of time, and Alderman Vaughn, maybe, and of course, I used to represent that ward, and I'll do as well what I can to join in with the support. Yes, sir.
Do we have any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Any further questions or comments? Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Purnell. Our next public appearance tonight is from the fire department. Tell us about the Pink Hills tour. And y'all will have 10 minutes to make your presentation. I'll ask that y'all remain seated for questions and comments after you wrap it up.
Good afternoon, Mayor Board. I've brought with me tonight our training officer, Charles Yarbrough, to help explain this better. Mr. Yarbrough is very instrumental in putting this together this year as he did last year. In fact, Mr. Yarbrough is the reason why the Pink Hills Tour is in Starkville to begin with. And with that, I'll take the back seat to Mr. Yarbrough.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Board. The Pink Hills Tour, we had it last year in October. Of course, Mayor, you were part of it. You did the proclamation last year. This year, let me give you a little background on the Pink Hills Tour. I can just kind of read their bio. The Guardians of the Ribbon, dressed in pink fire suits, will drive pink fire trucks across the country every year to spread out awareness campaigns supporting all women in our fight against cancer. The Guardians bring the tour to help raise money and awareness for nonprofit entities that help women in their city and state. In addition, this nonprofit support and helps other nonprofit organizations raise money by bringing the pink fire trucks to various fundraisers to assist in the efforts at no charge to the organization. As Guardians of the Ribbons, our goal is to spread the Care Enough to Wear Pink campaign until all are in pink shirts. Why? Because pink is. And basically what they do, they go around. It started in 2007 by a firefighter by the name of Dave Graybill out of Arizona. They drive around the country in pink fire trucks, going to different areas to get them to bring awareness to cancer in women. 2009, I tried to get them in Starkville, but they couldn't come. They rescheduled for 2010. First time they ever came to Mississippi, they happened to be here at Starkville, so we were proud of that. They were so impressed by what they saw last year that he called me and asked me if they could come back again this year. So they want to come back on October the 17th. On the agenda is October the 15th, but the 15th is actually a run, Pink Hills run, 5K and 1 mile fun run. But the 17th, on that Monday, would actually be the Pink Hills Tour. They'll be coming to the city. They'll be visiting 3 of our local schools. And around lunchtime, they'll be at Fire Station 1 for probably about 12 to about 2 o'clock. Anybody want to come down to sign the pink truck? If you have any family members or if you've been affected by cancer, you have the opportunity to sign the pink fire trucks. And most trucks, it's probably 300,000 or 400,000 signatures on each truck. So it's something good for our city to bring awareness to cancer, and we'll be honored to ask the board permission to let any employee that would like to wear a pink shirt that day to support cancer to be able to do that.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Yarborough or Chief Mann? Any? Alderman Sistrum.
This is something that means a lot to me more this year than it did last year. I'm coming up on the first anniversary of having been diagnosed with breast cancer and having gone through the treatment of that. In the 1970s, 1 out of 11 women were diagnosed with breast cancer. Currently, 1 out of 8 women are diagnosed with breast cancer. 250,000 plus people women each year, and a handful of men are diagnosed, newly diagnosed with breast cancer. That's the bad news. The good news is that with early diagnosis and treatment, there's a very, very good survival rate. There's over 2.5 million women in the United States who are breast cancer survivors. The 2 biggest risk factors, gender and age. So things that y'all are doing like this that help bring awareness, help educate the public, help raise funds for research, really are above and beyond the call of duty. And I appreciate it, like I said, much more this year than I did last year.
Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Any further questions or comments? Any further questions? Well, thank you, and thank you for putting this event together.
Good luck.
And with no public hearings tonight, that will take us to board business. Our first matter of board business is a report from Doug Devlin on the status of improvements to the sewer system throughout the city and the extension of services to the 1998 annexed areas.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Board. Just to bring you up to date, first of all, there's two parts of this. One, where we are as far as getting services to the 98 annexed areas during this term. We'll cover that. And the second part was infrastructure rehab work we've done since the spring rains and some problems we had with the sewage collection system at that time. First of all, we'll go over some sewer projects that have been completed. This is a project where we had a resident up on Sudeth Road in north central Starkville who was moving in a manufactured home and was facing some pretty heavy compliance issues with Department of Health for a private sewer treatment system. So we were able to put this project together, and the landowner we had to come through was very cooperative, and we're able to get this service to this resident in time. It's about 1,900 feet of gravity sewer. And also, this will also serve to, at the time when this gentleman here needs service, we'll be able to extend it up the right-of-way of Sudeth Road and serve him as well. This is a project we completed within the last year. Y'all may remember, this is Florida Care Properties that was in desperate need of a city sewer connection because they were under a DEQ agreed order. We were able to put this project together. Of course, you know, the thing that makes these projects go so fast is cooperation from the landowners, because we have to cross a lot of private property to make these things happen. And I feel very fortunate to be in the Starkville community where so many landowners are willing to, you know, cooperate so they can help their neighbors. It really is a good thing. We can be proud of our community in that regard. But this system actually serves this new, I guess you would call it a business park that was platted here along Fire Station Road. There's about 3 existing homes down here with septic tanks that will be able to hook up now when they get ready to. And there's a funeral home, unless that's changed, that's scheduled to go in on this particular parcel. And they wanted to locate the building pretty good ways from the road on the top of a hill. And this will lower their cost by being able to connect to the rear instead of having to come all the way down to East Garrett Road to hook up. So, and another part of this project was we were able to extend fire protection. We ran a 6-inch line down to the southwest corner of this particular parcel, which is, I believe, Grady Hollis's business. And now we have fire hydrants down through there and have provided fire protection as well. This is a project we completed on Greta Lane, which, as you all know, is right to the west of the airport. Had a couple of houses down here that were experiencing problems with their septic system and were requesting a hookup to the city sewer system. The original design of the extension down there, we using the 8-inch pipe we normally use, basically stopped right here because we were running out of grade. If we continued to come down with that same size pipe, we would have basically been up out of the ground about right here. But we, down in our yard on Sand Road, we had a lot of large diameter surplus pipe left over from an interceptor project back in 2005, 18-inch, 21-inch pipe. And with the larger pipe, we're able to lay on much shallower grades, and we're actually able to not only use up the surplus pipe, but also extend the sewer service down to serve these 2 residents. We also extended fire protection. We connected to an existing line down here, went to the east side of Greta Lane, then cut over and providing fire protection to this, I believe it's a portable building business out here on Highway 25. So all the residents on Greta Lane now have fire hydrants, so if a fire were to break out, we have the right infrastructure to be able to mediate that fire. This is a project that we had already started several months ago, and we got to this point right here and stopped because there was a little property acquisition matter that we were dealing with down here. Happy to say that that matter has been settled. We've ordered the materials to complete this part of it, and within the next 30 days, we'll have fire protection to basically each end, the east end of Geechee, and then also there's some houses on the other side as well, and then also fire hydrant to be able to serve these residences down on the west end of Geechee Lane. Projects on tap for next year, we'll just go over those. This is our biggest project, and the property acquisition process it takes a long time on these because you have so many pieces of property that you have to cross. And you know, I'm glad to say that about 85% of the landowners were very cooperative and glad to have it and have signed easements, and then the other 15% were, you know, allowing additional time to work with them and make sure they're comfortable with what we're trying to do. And our schedule, as far as property acquisition goes, is to basically complete all the voluntary easement processes by the end of this month, and have any eminent domain request for the board on the 1st of November. And then we anticipate, you know, having the project completed next year. The preliminary design is done. All the hydraulic calculations have been done, and the permit is ready to go in. We feel comfortable enough that we have enough easements that we can submit our construction plans to the Department of Health for a permit by the 14th of this month. So this is a good project. You know, we have a lot of density up here of homes, a lot of wood frame homes that need to have plenty of water for our fire department to fight a fire, particularly, you know, with the winter months when we tend to have more fires in homes during that time. Okay, this is a project that we're still working through the property acquisition part of it. The preliminary design is complete. This is, for those of y'all not familiar, this is down on Old 25, which is now called Louisville Street, close to the city limits. And this is the Deerfield subdivision here. And about 3 years ago, we were able to acquire the sewer utility here in Deerfield, and now we're serving them with sewer, the city of Starkville. And part of that acquisition was we got possession of a pumping station that's located right here at the northwest corner of the, I'm not sure if that's the Shriners building or VFW, I'm not sure which one it was, but anyway, that pumping station is located here. This project will involve relocating this pumping station to the east end of Henderson Road, and then a gravity sewer collection system will flow in this direction into that pumping station, and then from the pumping station we'll pump back to the west side of Louisville Street and connect to the existing force main that runs up the west side of Highway 25. This was a rather complicated property acquisition endeavor, mainly because on the north side of Henderson Road is on 16th section land, and the people here, although we have to get them to sign permission easements, but they're actually leasing these properties from the school district. So the title searches, we had to hire an outside attorney to go and do a lot of title search, and that's been completed. We had already been talking to, all these folks down here, they're on board, and we should have all the voluntary easements by the end of November, and then by the first meeting in December, we'll have any eminent domain requests that we need to the board. Once we, get eminent domain approved, then we pretty well know what the construction of the project's gonna be, which we need to submit to the Department of Environmental Quality for a permit, and we'll have that done by the 16th of December. And then as soon as any eminent domain issues, which we hope we don't have any, but if we do, as soon as they're concluded, then construction will be ready to start construction on that project. These are projects that might span a couple of years. This is a project that the preliminary design was completed last week. And this, for those of you not familiar, this is Garrett Road. It is Garrett Road, right, Mr. Perkins? Up this way?
Right.
Garrett Road, okay. And then this is Babylon Road that runs south at this end of Garrett. The city limits kind of run
To the
kind of
foot.
like that. City limits do. I don't know if y'all ever rode out here. It's a very pretty area of town, a lot of rolling hills and open pasture land, very pretty area but the rolling hills that make the area so attractive present somewhat of a challenge when you're trying to run a gravity sewer system. We've got some pretty deep cuts that we would have to do, like 16-foot cuts kind of in this area, and this area. So to make sure we're going to be okay, we've commissioned Pritchard Engineering to go out and do some soil profiles, some boring and soil profiles, to make sure that we're not getting into any lime rock or chalk or anything like that that's going to cause problems. So that when we go ahead and start the construction of the project, we'll know if we have any tough issues that we're going to have to deal with. This part, if y'all have ever rode down Babylon Road, it's a great place as far as being in a hot spot in the city. There's probably some floodplain area out in here, probably some down in here, but the elevations up on Babylon Road are great as far as being protected from any flooding. The only issue is this is kind of the peak where everything kind of falls back this way. If you go down Garrett Road and then to this point, then you notice you go down a pretty good hill. There's a spot up here that's like 290 foot above sea level, and this down here is about 230. So that's about a 60-foot drop in elevation from here to there. So we are going to have a pumping station for this particular project, and we're proposing to locate it here on the west side of, south side of West Garrett Road, and service the residents by gravity, putting in a gravity sewer system that falls to the west and into this gravity system, into the pumping station, and then we'll have a force main that pumps it up the hill and into this gravity collection system. The final design should be complete by the end of November. Voluntary easements, we will go through that process, or would have gone through that process by the end of February. Any eminent domain requests that we may need, we'll have to the board by the first meeting in March, and then at that time we'll be able to prepare our DEQ permit application and get it on in. The construction will begin if there are any eminent domain actions. Construction will begin as soon as those issues are concluded. Okay, this is a project that has come up within the last couple of weeks. This is Highway 12 west of the bypass going towards Sturgis. This is Bluefield Road here, and this is Pinecrest Road here. Somebody has bought this lot and has contacted me and says they need sewer service. We are in the process, I think y'all know what this property is here. This is a property owned by the Bluefield Water Association. So if we're successful in completing our closing and acquisition, we'll be able to cross that property and come up here to service these. You got a lot here, a lot here, a lot here, and then this particular lot here that will have sewer service. And then we got 2 landowners here and then 1 here that we're working with to see if we can get easements to cross their property. We expect to make contact with them very, very soon, probably this week, and work with them and see if we can get voluntary easements by the end of November. If we have any eminent domain requests by the first meeting in December, and then we'll submit the NDEQ application for a permit middle of December. So if all this thing runs on schedule, when they apply for a building permit, we'll be ready to go to get down there and get them their sewer service. This is in that same area of town. This was Pinecrest over down here, but this is Bluefield Road running south from Highway 12. This is the Cornerstone Industrial Park, and these residents here along Bluefield Road, this is about where the city limit line runs. Behind them on Bluefield Road, with the acquisition of the Bluefield Water Association, we have a property acquisition matter that we're working through right now as far as existing infrastructure in the area that we want to acquire. And if we're able to do that, this will be a very competitive CDBG matching grant application. We have a lot of low to moderate income beneficiaries in this area, and by using existing infrastructure, we'll be able to get that in for a pretty competitive cost. So the cost to benefit ratio for the application will be very good and put us in good standing to get a CDBG matching grant. Of course, we're working through this part right now. Preliminary design, a lot will depend on how this goes, but preliminary design, we want to get that done by the end of the year. Talked to Phyllis Benson, and she said the applications to CDBG need to go in around March and April, so we want to have that application ready to submit by the middle of February. And of course, voluntary easements, we want to have by the end of February, and then any eminent domain request by the first board meeting in March of 2012. This is a fairly sizable project that we had talked about. That was also going to be part of this Bluefield Road service project, but now that we have an opportunity to use some existing infrastructure in this area, if we're able to acquire it, we will be able to do that project independent of having to do this one, which was about a $1.5 million project that we discussed last year at this time. This is Highway 25 bypass. This is the airport. The city limit line runs right through here, about in that area, and it stops. Right now, we don't have any way to provide sewer service to these commercial frontages down in this area. So this is a project that we need to go ahead and start getting the design work at least. And also in this project, we're trying to strategically plan for the future. As we all know, Courthouse Road is now paved all the way to the horse park, and there is talk sometime in the very near future of opening a southern entrance to the Mississippi State campus.
Is the reason that it goes around the business, is the reason that the sewer service would go behind the 2 businesses on the bypass? Is that why it doesn't follow the bypass all the way down south?
Oh, okay, that's a good question. There's a, this coming down through here is a creek called Tobacco Juice Creek. I don't know if you've heard of Tobacco Juice Creek, but anyway, along these creeks is typically the way that gravity sewer is run, because, you know, you're following a natural grade that goes downhill. So, when we come up here, along this area here, you start to get higher elevations and everything starts to fall back to the west. So we'll run this interceptor through here, but if somebody needs sewer service up in this area, we'll have manholes at all these property boundaries, and then we can extend a lateral to catch them. So this is just more like the main interceptor that's ready to accommodate any requests for sewer service.
Would this also be the project that will complete sewer service to Greta Lane?
Yeah. This is the south end of Greta Lane right here, Ms. Sistrunk. So everything, you know, where we got to, you get over that ridge, it starts to fall to the south. So that'll be part of that. Basically, that's where this starts. It starts at the south end of Greta Lane. We've got some commercial properties here on the bypass that'll serve, and we'll cross over. There's a creek crossing here. We'll cross over and then come down and then get on that Tobacco Juice Creek. Now with the thinking ahead down the road, you know, past my time with the city and maybe, you know, maybe some of our time, but now that this road is paved, Poorhouse Road, there is some talk of eventually having a southern entrance to the campus, you know, out at the horse park going up through South Farm. So if that happens, and this is probably going to be an area that's going to be attractive for development in the future, it could be, you know, an annexation area to be considered by the city sometime, is to come all the way down, bring on down to Poorhouse Road, and then come across. And right now the city limit comes kind of like this, south end of Deerfield, and then, you know, just to get this area into the city, because probably going to see a lot of demand to get these properties for commercial retail or, you know, similar things. And then being such a quick route to the campus, you may see some residential development, you know, wanting to go on the north side of Poorhouse Road in the future. But anyway, we've got the preliminary design for this section. We wanted to make sure that the elevations were going to work out as far as taking the gravity sewer all the way down to Poorhouse Road, and they do. So that part's done. The next phase will be, you know, the elevation, the gross elevation drops work out well to get everything to here. So we feel pretty good that the gravity portion of this will work. Then of course, you know, we have the pump station design, and then we have an existing force main that comes through the airport, the south end of the airport, and we would bring force main up the east side of 25 and tie into that existing force main here. So you know, that having that part of it already in place keeps the cost down. Of course, you know, we have, you know, the property acquisition part, you know, that we'll have to work through. But we want to have a preliminary design by the middle part of next year, by the end of the second quarter, and start working on easements, you know, at that time, and then have any voluntary ones on board by the end of the third quarter, and then any eminent domain requests to the board by the first meeting in October next year. And once we have those issues resolved, then we'll have a pretty good idea of what our final design is going to be, and we can submit to the DEQ for a permit. Then, like all the others, we'll commence with construction when the property issues are all taken care of. Mayor wanted me to also give an update on some of the issues we've been having with stormwater surcharges or discharges in our sewer collection system, stemming from the tornado last spring, where we had a pretty good sizable storm come through and with a lot of rainfall in a short period of time. three major areas where we experienced problems were Carver Drive. We had issues there during that event, and then in the Woodland Heights areas, we had at least 3 manholes I know of up here that were surcharging pretty well during that event. And then we were made aware of a situation here at the intersection of Yellow Jack and Edford Drive during that event as well. And so these are the three major ones that we have been working on since then. And give you an update on, let's talk about Carver Drive first. And this is, of course, y'all know we're under a DEQ agreed order, which expires in the end of May of next year. So we are very focused on getting this problem solved. And we're 99%, I'll say 90% sure that we know what the problem is. And I'll explain that to you without going into too much technical detail. But prior to 2005, all this stuff here that I'm pointing out wasn't there. This is new stuff that was put in since 2005. Prior to that, the only loads coming into the Trim Cane pump station, which is right here, south of Garrett Road by this old lagoon, were coming from the east. Carver Drive is one of those collection systems that comes in here. And that's all we had coming into that pump station. Around 2002, 2003, the city hired Clearwater Consulting to design an interceptor system to make sure that we could provide sewer services very quickly to this northwest part of Starkville, this area out in here, primarily west of the bypass and north of Highway 12. Before that project was done, there were 2 pumping stations that I want to point out. One was here, where the old 4 County billing office used to be. You probably remember that over there on Stark Road. And then Highland Estates had a pumping station that served just then, back before 2005 as well. As part of this project, and the concept is good. Since you're putting in a pumping station here, you may as well close down and get rid of redundant ones that we don't need. The fewer that you have, the fewer you have to maintain. But what we've discovered has happened is when these pumping stations basically pumped to the south over Highway 12, and then once you get past Highway 12, it flows to the south directly to our wastewater plant. So that direction of all this flow, and this pumping station here served the Green Oak subdivision, which is a fairly large subdivision, and then of course this Highland Estates. But anyway, all the I&I that was associated with serving these areas, now instead of it being pumped to the south, is now flowing by gravity up to the Josie Creek station, a new pump station, and being pumped into Trim Cane. So now we're discovering that situation is now creating a bottleneck in the pumping station itself. What we've done to prove this point is we purchased a standby pump which runs by diesel that we have out there now. And when the wet well during a storm tries to get up above the invert coming in from the east and the wet well, that pump comes on and then bypasses to this adjacent lagoon. And we found that when we keep the wet well level down below that invert in the pumping station, when we go back up here on Carver Drive during a heavy rain event, when we pull the manholes, the flows are considerably down. So we're 90% sure that this is our problem right here, was this project delivering a substantial more amount of I&I that's now having to come through this station. Go back. There you go back, Joel. Wait a minute. Okay. But anyway, this is kind of a summary of what we've done and where we're at as far as solving the problem on Carver Drive. Already talked about this. We've got the standby pump out there, and we've seen a significant reduction in the flow levels. And anecdotally, talking to some of the old guys that work in public services, just asking them, has this always been a problem? And they see, no, it just seems to have started happening within the last 5 or 6 years. So this, following that hunch, I think we're confirming that anecdotal information to be somewhat factual. So anyway, we're doing well there. I was out of town when tropical storm Lee came through last month, but I understand it was a pretty heavy rain event in a short amount of time. And unfortunately, that pump out of trim cane failed to prime. It's a self-priming pump, and there was a piece of trash in a check valve that basically just keeps liquid in the suction pipe, and it had drained out, and it wouldn't prime, and it didn't run, and we had some surcharging down on Carver Drive as a result. Since then, my guys have gone out there and made some modifications to the plumbing and how that pump is set up, which should prevent future priming failures of that nature. Several months back, the board approved us buying a flow meter for the Josie Creek station. That's the new one. That flow meter has been received, it's been installed, and it's currently being wired into our remote monitoring system. It'll have a totalizer on it, and with this data, we'll be able to determine the percentages of I&I coming from each source in the trim cane. Source A being from the east, as it historically was, and then source B, the new source coming in from the new Josie Creek pumping station. And basically, that'll confirm what we've been saying, and basically tell when we do something what kind of effect we're having on the big picture. During the rains, we have been working our way upstream in the gravity system from Josie Creek, and we've pretty much isolated the problem to the south side of 182. I'll go back to that previous one, but this is 182 here, so we're looking pretty good, till we get up about here. We start looking good, but then when we come back and start following this, it looks like we're getting a good bit coming from Green Oaks and some of these other areas. So hopefully this winter, when we have more opportunities to follow that, it's kind of like running down a fugitive, and getting them hemmed in where you can capture it. But it's very similar to that. Wish we could add more pumps to Trim Cane pumping station. That would solve the problem, make it very easy. But unfortunately, the limiting factor there is the force main. It's a 16-inch force main, and as a lot of you know, the higher the flows, the more pressure drop you get. And at 2,000 to 2,100 gallons a minute, that's the capacity of the force main. If we had to lay new force main or a parallel force main, it would be a pretty good project. We'd have to come all the way up here and then up through Stark Road and on the other side of Highway 12. So we're hoping that, finding a few major contributors, out in these areas, the big ones, if we can find the big ones and get them corrected, we're hoping that's going to put everything back in balance where we wouldn't have to do such a sizable and intrusive project as that. The other area is Woodland Heights. After that event back in the spring, tornado spring, we went through and conducted dye testing and found several places where we were getting some inflow in, and those have been corrected. But the major problem we found out was root penetration downstream of Woodland Heights. The board approved us to hire a professional to come and apply herbicides to those roots, and that was completed in August. During Tropical Storm Lee, the report I got was there was a minor discharge event from one manhole in Woodland Heights, where I think during the spring rains we had 3, possibly 4 manholes that were significantly overflowing. So apparently we're making some progress there. Then with this root treatment, it takes about 12 months for the, once you kill the roots, it takes about 12 months for them to actually clear themselves, the dead roots to clear themselves out. So we should see even more improvement over the next year or so. Eckford Drive, after that was reported to us, we did a TV inspection, and we have a pretty large interceptor that runs down through Starkville High School property, Academy property, south to the treatment plant. And we discovered a fairly large root blockage on the Starkville High School property. That was removed, and then that section was added to the list when the company came through in August and treated everything else in town. So that should slow the reoccurrence of the roots into that line.
Would that one back up to Pleasant Acres? Would that?
That was the one on Eckford you sent me the picture of?
Yeah.
Yeah, Pleasant Acres.
Does that line also does Pleasant Acres go into that line?
Yeah. The Pleasant Acres kind of high up,
Yeah.
so it wasn't a problem, but that spot there, that's just where it relieved itself there on that corner. But after what we found down there, I think we've solved that problem.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the city wasn't there a gap in some years where they didn't do the root treatment?
Well, they're designed to last 5 years, and we treat them every 5 years, but last summer was a pretty dry summer. And a lot of times when you go through a drought period like that, the roots tend to, get more aggressive. And so, this we accelerated it to a 4-year. It was due next year to be treated for the Woodland Heights collection system, but after we discovered what we had in there, we just accelerated it another year and treated it a year early. So, and I believe that's all I have. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments?
I was just about the root penetration. Most of our constituents in Green Oak, the roots are, I didn't know that was the main problem for the actual individual homeowner, but it seems to be getting better. I've seen and heard less complaints from individuals. So I was kind of just wondering if it was a time frame. Do they do it every 5 years, every other year? Are we going to get more? Will it occur more often?
The warranty on that treatment is 3 years, but experience has shown that 5 years, works. The warranty is going to be a lot earlier than what they think it's going to be. But, so from past experience, the 5-year cycle has worked well. But there are occasions like that one in downstream of Woodland Heights where we have to,
My second question was about Carver Drive and in respect to the Alderman Ward 6. So it sounds like the flow station is getting better, but that trash caused the last main discharge?
Well, yeah, up until we put that standby pump out there, the wet well level would rise until it bypassed to the adjacent lagoon. And unfortunately, if the invert into the wet well or the discharge in the wet fill well from the east Carver Drive is here, and then when it gets up above that, intuitively you would think that it wouldn't make any difference because even the wet well's here and this is coming in, that Carver Drive being such a higher elevation, it wouldn't make any difference, but it looks like it is. But during that storm and Tropical Storm Lee, apparently when the pump ran last time, some trash got into a check valve that you got to keep that suction pipe full of liquid for it to prime, for it to be able to prime, and something got stuck in that check valve, and it was a dry pipe and it wouldn't prime itself during Tropical Storm Lee. So,
is there anything we can do to further safeguard that from happening again?
We've already made some modifications to prevent that in the future.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Any further questions or comments? Alderman Court?
Just one quick one now. Are there other areas not mentioned in this report as it relates to the 98 annexed areas that still need to be completed? I mean, in addition to what you've shown us going up to about 2013, are there additional areas of work?
Yeah. There's, several areas, but our objective is to get interceptors, the main trunk lines into those areas where we can respond to needs quickly. There's, if we get a subdivision that wants to go in, and we gotta get them sewer service, or, within several hundred yards instead of several miles, and, we can easily get it to them. It's basically, you get the main trunk line there, and then when the needs arise, you can quickly respond to them.
But the
Because it's hard to anticipate who's gonna need what where.
But the residents who are in place, who are part of those 98 annexed territories will have access to these trunk lines when your construction projects are complete in 2013.
Yeah, if they say we
If
need
they-
it,
if
now
they
we may
want it.
not have it there when they say they need it.
Right,
But,
right.
we'll have to go to some property owners, but it'd be a,
It's a
one-week
simpler
construction
project.
job instead of a multi-year construction job,
Okay.
so. A lot of the folks where we have it nearby are perfectly happy with, they got big lots and they don't like paying a sewer bill and perfectly happy not to hook up to the sewer. So, any other questions?
Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Any further questions or comments? Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Devil.
Thank you.
The next matter on the agenda is a report on the status of the form-based codes development process. Mr. Griffith?
Mayor and Board, there's a memorandum kind of outlines what's going on with form-based codes. Placemakers provided us a draft a while back and went over that. It was an excellent draft, a lot of graphics. I think everyone's going to be really pleased with it. Had a lot of minor little revisions and probably half revisions, minor revisions and questions. There were two major things that we've been working on to move forward with this, and one of them is incorporating their code with our current process, as far as how projects within the form-based code areas are reviewed and move through the development process. There's also the other part that was I guess the biggest part was the portion that regarding their land uses or their permitted uses within the form-based code area or overlay district, or however we want to refer to it as. They basically pulled a plan off the shelf and did not incorporate our land use, our current land uses into that. So the question was, do we either revise theirs to meet ours, or do we revise ours, which are over 40 years old and in need of revision, and then use that as to incorporate into the form-based code? So I've been working on that. Ms. Daniels has been on board, and she's been doing a lot of research, trying to look at land uses and definitions that coincide with form-based codes. There's a lot in the southeast to try to pull something similar. We're working on that to move forward with that. So where we are right now is we have on the agenda, which was posted today for the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting next week on the 11th, is a work session for the Planning and Zoning Commission to look at the land use chart. The idea is to get some feedback on that land use chart, enough to the point that we feel like we can move forward with the land use chart and also forward that to the placemaker folks so they can incorporate that into the draft form-based code. Going from there, the Planning and Zoning Commission has indicated, and I've been talking to them a little bit about the form-based codes that are coming. The idea with that they were open to the idea of having a special call meeting just to discuss form-based codes when that comes up. Hopefully, we've got a target date of October 25th, which is normally historic preservation, but that meeting's been moved to November 3rd to accommodate some other meetings, so this room is available. That'll also give us time to make some final tweaks on that draft land use chart, get that to placemakers. There's a lot of things that are kind of going on at the same time, so that we can get that to placemakers folks, have a draft for the Planning and Zoning Commission to review in a work session on the 25th of this month, and then hopefully move forward to start public hearings in November. And that's kind of where we are now.
Questions or comments from the members of the board?
I've got just a few. So October 11th is set with P&Z to look at land use.
Yes, sir. That's for the land use chart. The agenda was posted today. Trying to work on the details and get a draft for the P&Z members to look at that, look at the land uses. Basically what we're doing is we're consolidating them down to make them more simple and with definitions that explain those uses. Instead of having 18 pages of uses, we hope to have maybe 2 pages in general categories.
So after that work session, it will then go to placemakers.
Go to
include in their
placemakers.
code.
Yes.
And then we will get the final code from placemakers and then begin the public hearing process in November.
Yes, but in between that, the Planning and Zoning Commission members at the last meeting, I talked to them, and I've talked to them previously, indicated that they would like to have a special call meeting just to look over, digest, review that form-based code.
Okay.
And we're looking to do that on the 25th of this month, and I'm going to bring that up on the 11th as part of that work session to bring back that land use chart. I say just bring it back, pull from that land use chart items into the form-based code so all of that meshes up, and then in February we'll be looking at doing that public hearings.
Would you expect between the 11th and the 25th that you get the final code back from placemakers?
I believe so. From what I understand with them, it's just a matter of the land use chart in the form-based code was 1 page, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you look at, we have 18 and revising that, it's basically a dollar waiting on a dime. 1 page that they have to insert, and then the other revisions about the process was in the first 2 pages of there. So it's minor changes. I'm anticipating they'll be able to get that changed and turn around to us so we can get a draft to the Planning and Zoning Commission members a couple days, or at least a week ahead of time, so they can be looking on that. And when we sit down on the 25th, we won't have any other items to review. They can concentrate just on that form-based code in a work session setting prior to public hearings.
So we'll have a public hearing on the 8th of November, as it's written in here.
That's
okay. And then so we, the board, should see it in December.
Yes, sir.
And you still feel that this January implementation date's feasible?
I think so. And one of the things that I would like to do is, generally those take place and, those take effect in 30 days. And what I would like to do is, since we're getting close to the end of the year, is as a separate resolution in conjunction with that. And I know Mr. Latimer probably want to weigh in on that a little bit, but to enact that in any time period less than the 30 days, and we're probably looking at 20 days or something like that, is to have it go into effect January 1. It's kind of a clean date and kind of cleans a lot of things up and as a move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, that is going to conclude our board business for this evening, and as we've been here for about an hour and a half, without objection, I'm going to move us into a brief recess. Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, brief recess. Meeting will now come back to order. The next matter on the agenda is the request for approval to enter into an agreement with Clearwater Consultants for professional services for multiple and various projects at Georgia and Bryan Airfield. Discussion? Alderman Sistra?
Yes. We have an agreement to enter into professional services for the airport, and one of the things that this board has been diligent about is monitoring what we pay for professional services and contracts that are negotiated. And I'm sorry to ask at the last minute, but do we know, and Alderman Carver is our liaison to the airport board, do we know if what sort of discount this is, how these rates compare to other municipalities? Because these are higher than rates that we pay to some of our other professionals, considerably higher.
Yeah, being the first I've heard of this, and I am board liaison between the local municipal airport and this, but with no prior knowledge, of this rate structure, I can find out and get back to you and find out. Are you wanting a comparison of cities comparable to our size?
Yes.
Because we have a pretty small airport in relative size to most in the
Or
state.
other-
And but I can find
Other
out.
communities and other airports in Mississippi or
Yeah.
similarly situated areas. There are some contracts that pin to this. Are they time sensitive? Can we?
Ms.
Relay
Brule,
those.
when the airport board contacted you about putting these items on the agenda, did they indicate whether these items were time sensitive?
No, sir, they did not, but I know that it's something that can wait until the next agenda. It's actually the last agenda, and Latimer has issued a contract, they pulled it from the last agenda, and I think
Okay. If you could follow up in the meantime on the rates and we'll deal with the rest.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there here a motion to table?
Motion to table.
Motion has been made by Alderman Sistrunk to table the request for approval to enter into an agreement with Clearwater Consultants and Professional Services for multiple and various projects at Georgia and Bryan Airfield. Alderman Sistrunk, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Corey. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. Alderman Sistrunk?
The next two items pinned to that contract, I think, Mayor, so.
Okay, without
Table
objection,
this.
I'll rule discussion of items 11A and A2 and A3 dilatory as they relate to the first item. Is there any objection to that? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that will take us to building codes and planning.
Oh, you left that one over.
And the first matter for your consideration is the approval item of P&Z item number PD 11-03. Mr. Griffin?
Mr. Mayor, I move approval.
Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to approve of a request by Mr. Michael Cracker for approval of a PUD plan unit development located on north side of East Garrett Road, west of Old West Point Road in Ward 5 as presented. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Parker. Alderman Dumas, do you wish to speak on the merits?
I do not.
I know the city attorney wants to brief you all on what your standard of review is for this matter.
There are two legal issues. One is a threshold issue, and that is the change in zoning request from an R1 to a PUD. So the board would have to make a finding of fact that there has been a change in the neighborhood that would justify the proposed rezoning, and that there is a public need for the proposed rezoning. If that test is met, then the second consideration would be whether the PUD specs have been met, which triggered some of the density issues that have been raised here tonight and in the P&Z meeting previously. But just my point was that the zoning change is the threshold issue, and the second issue is contingent upon that issue.
And does there need to be a discussion to the merits on this for the purpose of the record?
I would advise that there would be, given that we can use that to bring forth the finding of fact of the criteria.
Remember, this is a little different matter than your typical policy discussion. This matter has some elements to it that are more like a judicial process and specifically spoken to by statute. So if you are for this, you probably need to state some reasons why you're for it and why it meets the criteria that the city attorney has just outlined. If you are against this, you probably need to state some reasons as to why it doesn't meet that criteria.
Can I ask a couple questions?
You may.
This open just for discussion. Okay, so this is like starting the study yesterday on this, and this is going to ripple effect and create a precedent for everything in that whole big quadrant of land, 200 some odd acres that we're discussing here. And one of the things that, and explain to me somebody either with the P&Z or maybe on this board, but it says that you can have up to 25% variance or deviation, and that this one has this is coming off a memo I got, 51% greater the net density of R1 than what's allowed, correct or incorrect? Is that P and Z or something? I mean, somebody can.
Mr. Griffin?
I'm wondering what in the memo I got is 51% greater density, and the stated limit is 25%.
Well,
And I know this board can do
and
anything. they want to.
density is difficult with a PUD because the comp plan identifies maximum gross densities for all the zoning classifications except PUD. And a PUD, the intent of a PUD is to allow, through creative and innovative design, increases in density. So trying to compare a PUD property to an R1 property is a little difficult because there's not a stated range or maximum on gross as there is on an R1 or RE zone, which is what's in that area. So based on that fact, how you calculate the gross density is basically the acreage in the proposed in the number of units. When you calculate a net density, which really isn't identified in the code book or in the comprehensive plan, but is a term that I've been using to clarify the difference between the gross and the final, or the actual, the build. And I'm going to have to work with Mr. Latimer to come up with some kind of way to explain that and define that, in the future. In a zoning where in a regular zoning you would come up with your, for lack of a better term, your final density takes into consideration your roads and your infrastructure. And generally in your straight zonings you don't have amenities such as common area and open space as you do in a PUD, which is a requirement of a PUD. Now the PUD regulations also, and there's two sets of regulations, one dealing with the zoning and one dealing with the subdivision regs. At the end of the report, I included, at the direction of the Planning and Zoning Commission, some definitions from those two sections regarding the zoning and also subdivision regs, which a plat has not been submitted. But those regs require that you less out streets and other items. So that the best I could come up with, based on the information that's been provided so far to date, because the infrastructure and the platting has not been done where you really get into the detail, was a number that was higher. I believe it was, I believe what we came up with was, if you figured a gross, just a number of units based on the 5.01 acres, it comes out to 4.59 dwelling units an acre. Now that's not a good comparison as far as a gross, because that's an actual based on using a gross calculation. I know this is confusing. It's confusing to me.
That's
and I do
before
it
you
all
put
the time.
roads and infrastructure.
Well, that's not taking out the roads, and that's your actual density, and for lack of a better way to define it, and our regs don't give us any variations on it. When you calculate according to the regulations for lessening out the roads, it comes out to be 6.04, and that is probably not as accurate as it would be if an infrastructure plan and all the details had been broken down. It probably is a little bit higher, but we would know that when, if it was approved and they moved forward and we had what that was. At that point, the city attorney had advised that we seek a variance from the Board of Adjustment and Appeals. So whatever that number is going to end up being, with the infrastructure plan, it would go to the Board of Adjustment and Appeals for a variance in a public hearing. So the best I could come up with was 6.04, which is probably on the low side. It may be higher. I don't think it'll be any lower because there's probably going to be some common area that I didn't have a real good accurate on all of that. So it was real, again, it's an estimate. And you're kind of comparing a zoning that doesn't have those parameters to an R1 and an RE that has very specific parameters. So it's a little tricky on something where you've got allowances that are subjective in nature.
The city attorney's asked to expound on Mr. Griffith's description.
Alderman Carver, just to tag that point, you do calculate it on the net. The ordinance calls for a PUD density to be calculated on the net because it takes out the streets. And so the number that I would advise you to latch onto would be the net density. I believe Dr. Herring's memo is accurate in that net density, and perhaps Ben Griffith's subsequent calculations at the end of his staff report take on the true net. The issue then is you compare it to a hypothetical net in R1 because you don't really know what someone would do in R1. And so you're kind of going off the best guess of what would happen as a net result in R1. But that's what the regs say to do.
I guess it just kind of, that was a red flag to me, the 51%, you know, I'm trying to put this in layman terms so I can understand it. And the second one, the narrow roads, it says that more narrow than our city requirement.
Right,
But that the-
and that was actually, that was a known and that was an understood. Now, the fact that those are all narrow during the staff review at the Development Review Committee meeting, the fire department, sanitation department, they all looked at it and they determined that because of the radiuses and everything provided, that emergency, you know, that emergency vehicles, fire trucks can access. Now, again, the city attorney said specifically that those dimensions, I believe it was the right-of-way, the street width, and the sidewalk, I believe all three of those, sidewalk, all of those dimensions, and we call that out as a specific condition for the Board of Adjustment Appeals to address through the variance process as a dimensional variance.
And so, Mr. Griffith, one question. If you compare the true net of this PUD to your best guess for a net in R1, would the density eclipse the 25% allowance?
Well, 6.04 and a maximum of 4, so that's 2 dwelling units over. So, you know, with such a low one, I guess that would be higher.
And then I took the position in the planning and zoning meeting, and would take the position now, in fact I do, that if we're seeking a density variance, that determination is made by the Board of Adjustment and Appeals.
But I've got real issue with that from the side that R1 is a gross calculation when PUD is a net calculation. I mean, when you take a 26-foot right-of-way, that's 209 feet long, that goes the entire length of an acre. You parse out or you take out the full 50-foot right-of-way. I mean, if we want to compare apples and apples here, then we need to look at what would actually be required if you took a whole acre of land and parsed it out in 4 parcels and put a lane down the middle. And I think it's unfair from the side that here we have a well-designed development, and here we're splitting hairs from the development side of looking at a process that's faulty. I mean, you know, the PUD is supposed to be incentivized to the point that good design is merited, and that it's easier to do good design and have good design. And frankly, if this sets a ripple effect through the whole thing, then great, because here we have good design, good planning, and good processes that's leading this whole part of town that has not been developed. And I think that's far greater. These aren't sugar shacks, as they've been stated. These are well-built homes in a well-designed neighborhood with how many acres of green space? Now, 2 acres of green space. The road width, I mean, I think our road width requirements are not very good to begin with. I mean, high-speed roads, excuse me. That may be telling me something. But, you know, the city here, we've got a 24-foot road, or whatever it may be, 20-foot drive lanes, 2-foot, 24-foot back of curb, back of curb. Radiuses match what the required by the fire truck. It's a good project. And on the change of need, I mean, we've got documented public need from the realtors that can prove it with numbers. There is no greater change in my standpoint than having a greenfield development or a piece of green land that has a significant road that goes through the middle of it. And I think, you know, what greater change do you need? And so I think there's plenty finding of fact, both from the public needs standpoint that's well documented, and the fact that we've just invested $1 million+ immediately adjacent to this property to prove the public need or the change.
Further discussion?
Ben, what are, just for my information, what are the densities for R2, R3, and R4?
R1, RE and R1 are low density, which is a maximum of 4 per acre. R2 and R3 are medium density, which is a maximum of 8. And R4 and R5 are high density, which is a maximum of 15. So we basically have the 3, high, medium, and low, which is 4, 8, and 15. And PUD has a note that just says higher densities may be achieved, and then with the condition that the 25% cap on adjacent surrounding properties. And again, it's, kind of apples and oranges when grosses and net. I think Alderman Dumas hit it right on the head with,
Right.
one goes gross
Yeah.
and one goes net.
I
So
agree
it's-
you're not comparing them.
Mr. Latimer, am I hearing this correctly, that if the board approves this tonight, there's still a step that this will have to go through to go to the Board of Adjustments and Appeals?
I think that's the proper legal process, that this board needs to make a determination on whether there's been a change in the neighborhood that would justify the proposed rezoning, and whether there's a public need for the proposed rezoning. And if the board does make that finding, then it's appropriate to send the application to the Board of Adjustment and Appeals to make the density variance determination.
Should the board make that part of its motion in approving it, if that's what the board so chooses?
Sure, but the Planning and Zoning Commission did just that by sending all of the other variance issues to the Board of Adjustment and Appeals,
So-
sidewalks, roads, and.
With an affirmation, all of that would be affirmed.
Correct.
And now, just to get clarification, I know we've talked about this, but I want it understood. Here, we've got a process that requires site plans, that requires design, but yet our city process does not allow us to accept it all as a package. We have to send this through multiple processes so that it goes to Board of Alderman for zoning, BOAA for dimensional variances, which are part of the site redesigns that we require, that I personally feel should be a part of the PUD package as once approved. But I think we've been proven and told that that's not actually the case. Any dimensional variances, despite the fact of a special zoning reg, has to go to BOAA.
There's mandatory language that says all variances relating to subdivisions and/or zoning goes to the Board of Adjustments and Appeals.
Okay, so to clarify and make sure we've got a motion that effectuates what you say it needs to be. The motion was for the approval of the item as it reads on the agenda as presented. Is that sufficient, in your opinion, to include the recommendation that was made by Planning and Zoning?
Well, it depends on which way the decision goes on changing the.
In the event that this motion was passed, you've got a motion for the approval of P and Z item number PD 11-03, and then the rest of what's stated on the agenda and as presented.
Then with the additional condition that the density issue go before the Board of Adjustment and Appeals with all of the other variance issues.
Okay, you think it needs that to be clear?
Yes, because density is not addressed in the planning and zoning charge to this board.
Okay. All right, so just to be clear, the motion that you have right now does not clearly effectuate the intent that this matter is to go to Board of Adjustment and Appeals.
The Board of Aldermen don't have the authority on the density side, or that's a part of the dimensional side that BOAA would take care of,
It's a variance.
despite being dimensional.
That this word dimensional variance is a catchphrase, but the ordinance doesn't say dimensional variance. It says all variances are heard before the Board of Adjustment and Appeals.
So what's the difference between what you're saying and what is already required in number 2?
It's my understanding number 2 did not address density.
I was just going to say, it may be just to add density to number 2 would address what the mayor's bringing up as far as addressing all of the items that would need to be addressed by the Board of Adjustment and Appeals. Alderman Parker, the dimensionals variances for the roadways and right-of-ways, those were known, and that was why specifically the city attorney asked me to put a specific condition addressing that, and the density question was, again, depending on how you calculate it and address it, it was still kind of up in the air.
And again, guys, just to make sure you understand that we're not wasting time going through procedures that we don't have to, The Mississippi Supreme Court says that when you rezone to a PUD, that is a zoning change that has to pass the zoning test. And the people that can make that determination is this board, ultimately. And that's why that's the threshold issue.
So basically, we're just determining if there's been a character change of the neighborhood, period,
And a public need for the proposed.
and
rezone.
or a public need.
No, and.
And your basis for changing character of the neighborhood or what? For public knowledge? East.
The road and the public need was, the establishment of the road and the public need was the information provided from realtors, a demand for housing at that price point.
Will ingress and egress be on Garrett Road, or would it be on West Point?
There's 2 access points on Garrett Road. On the plan, they're showing 2 access points off Garrett.
So this development will be dependent upon Garrett Road for the entrance and the exit?
Yes.
And your motion you have probably needs to be amended to clarify that the variance matters will go to Board of Adjustment Appeals.
Ben, when you do net density calculations, I'm assuming with R1 at 5 acres, you just take it as a standard that there's 20 DUs allowable on those 5?
As a gross. If
As a gross?
If a developer came in and said, I got 20 acres of R1 zone property, how many houses could I build? I say a maximum of 20. And
But then to get the net, you take out the allowable buildable space minus the road and then, or the public, the unbuildable space, considering right-of-way, et cetera.
Generally,
Then
the
back that
road-
into the DUs that are allowed per the
Yes,
gross.
generally, it's only the road because all your other straight zonings don't have a requirement for open space, common areas, and other amenities that a PUD does. And that's
All right.
factored into the design.
If I do that math, I've got 5.2 DUs per acre allowable with R1 when you take out a 50-foot right-of-way at 206 feet per acre. So that's a 50-foot right-of-way going the length of an acre for 5 acres.
Oh, okay, I understand what you're saying.
I'm trying to figure out the net here. So if we figure out the net on DUs per acre on a 5-acre site, then that's roughly a net of 5.2 DUs per acre.
Yes, and I had addressed that on number 7, on page 7, under land use compatibility. I gave a comparison for an R1, for a straight zoning. And I came up with, what did I come up with? 22.22, I'm sorry, let me back up. 22.22, but because of the lot size of 10,000 square feet, but that would exceed it, so it would back down to, it would work out to, if you figured the 20%, if you figure 20% for infrastructure, it'd work out to 3.99. And that's on about the top of page 8. I mean, again, trying to guess because a good example, we have a plat coming up this month that's R1, it's 1.15 acres. The streets and everything are existing, and there's really not a net density because what you see is what you get. There is no infrastructure other than utility easements.
But if you look at gross, which is no infrastructure,
Yes,
density spread over the acreage,
the entire acreage.
you get 4 DUs per acre,
Yes,
allowable R1.
yes,
So then you take out the infrastructure, you're dealing with less acres, the same dwelling units. So your density per acre will then increase.
it does, if you figure it that way.
So if you take out the infrastructure associated with this fictitious R1, we don't know what the infrastructure is, but let's assume that a 50-foot right-of-way goes the entire length of 1 acre. Length of an acre is 206 feet. You take that times 50, minus it the 43,560, extract that over 5 acres, then you've got a net dwelling unit per acre of 5.2. That's net, which is greater than the 4.
Yes,
So now we're comparing a 5.2 DU per acre with an allowable infrastructure, with this 50 feet the length of which is 50 feet the length of the acre. Now we're comparing something that's halfway apples and oranges. much less you take out any park space, which would be considered, which is not allowable in or is not required in R1, correct?
Correct.
So if you take 5.2 DUs per acre compared to the 6.04 that you have, what does that give us? Compared to the 25% increase allowable with the PUD?
I don't have a calculator. It's closer. I don't know exactly what it is without a calculator.
I think the bottom line in all this is that BOAA is going to come up with the same issue that we have. Now, they're going to have to offer the variance, correct?
Correct.
Despite the fact that we're grasping for straws here because of the...
They're the body that's empowered to grant the variance.
Well, then I amend my motion to include the approval of the PUD as stated in the motion, with the finding of facts that there has been a change in character due to the construction of Garrett Road and the public need associated with documented realtor needs. With the, and I want to be sure that the addition is included that's needed for this to go to BOAA.
Just add it to item 2.
And I want to amend item 2 as comments from P&Z to include that this include density.
All right. Without an objection, I'm going to make this rescinding and restating your motion.
That'd be fine.
That's cleaner than amending it. Is there any objection to this being treated as a rescind and restate? All right. Alderman Dumas has rescinded and restated his previous motion to be a motion to approve the plan unit development request of Michael Cracker for the 5.01 acres located on the north side of East Garrett Road, west side of Old West Point Road at the southwest corner of former Pilkington Trailer Park, with the 5 conditions recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Also noting that condition 2 should reference that the
Variance of density.
Variance of density should be referred to the Board of Adjustment Appeals. Alderman Dumas's motion is based on finding of fact that there has been a change in the character.
You mentioned Garrard Road. Alderman Dumas, is it your intention to also adopt the findings of fact of change in the staff report?
Yes.
All right, Alderman Dumas has also placed in his motion the adoption of the finding of facts in the staff report, and he has further stated that the change in the character of the area is the construction of a portion of Garrett Road adjacent to the property, and the public need is the information proffered in the staff report by local realtors. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Parker. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak on the merits?
I do not.
Any discussion?
I've got just 2 more questions. And this is, I haven't made my mind up yet, so. Does a road typically count as a change of character in a neighborhood? Has that been historically proven to be one of the reasons as a change of character? Any kind of roadway being built is there an answer for that? I mean, does a road count as a change of character in a neighborhood?
Well, I mean, I would assume that it does because it opens up previously, a property that was previously unavailable without road frontage. It allows it now to be platted and eventually developed. So it's like that first step.
Alderman Carver, there's a Supreme Court case, Mississippi Supreme Court, that says a road can be one factor.
It can be. Okay. Second, the documentation of public need. All I've got, unless y'all got maybe what y'all talking about, I've got one letter from a realtor that not only states there was a public need because she thought so, but because there was maybe, if this doesn't happen, then an income-based project will be put there instead. So the documentation of fact, if that's something we actually got some numbers, some real-world numbers that we need this type of development here in Starkville? Or is this just one letter? Is this all I'm supposed to reference? Or is that, I mean, what's the documentation or the finding of fact that
It's-
we're referencing?
It's the things that Alderman Dumas put into his motion, which include the things that are in the staff report.
So Alderman Dumas, what other documentation do I need to be referencing?
Well, there is the letter from the one Realtor, and I do know as a recap of the P and Z meeting, is that included here, Ben, or have I read that somewhere else, where there was
Well, I was
a
gonna,
mention from Realtors in that meeting where the need was there?
there was some public comments provided by Area Realtor, and the Planning and Zoning Commission has received similar studies and analysis on houses at that price point range, citywide. So that's
Yeah.
kind of been an ongoing thing that the Planning and Zoning Commission hears. Again, I could pull that from previous rezonings around the city over the last couple of years.
I know with the Heartline development, and you provided some pretty good data for what they provided as a need for that development, but maybe in the future provide more than this one letter that is somebody's opinion, more or less. But if we could get some kind of statistical data or some kind of hard numbers of maybe housing units occupied, unoccupied.
I can't remember if it was Prudential or Colwell Banker, but they provided on our zoning about 2 years ago, they provided about 12 or 15 pages, and it was very accurate down to the housing ranges, I mean, the cost of houses or the selling price, and they had a breakdown on that, and that was, that's been referred to off and on by the planning and zoning, and of course, anything current when someone has an application for a rezoning, which we haven't had any in a while. We've got one for next month, but, when they come in, ask for them to provide that.
Yeah, please do, because I guess my greatest fear is to approve this and then it sit vacant because there's not a need for it, so, or half vacant, or, just my personal opinion, but so maybe if we can have more, because before I've seen you turn in some pretty good data, and maybe that was Coldwell Banker's data, but of actual occupancy rate in town for that type of development, whichever one we're discussing that night, so. Thank you.
Further discussion? Do we have any further discussion?
Question. Mr. Griffith, is there anything in your staff report that references the testimony of the other Realtor before the P and Z? One was Melanie Mitchell. Who was the other?
It would be in the minutes, and I'm working on the minutes in addition to everything else for P and Z for next week. So we're working on getting the minutes because that was provided at the hearing, and I can't remember who it was. There was a lot of folks that spoke. Several of them are here this evening.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, please answer yay, nay, or abstain as the deputy clerk calls your name on Alderman Dumas's motion.
Alderman Carver,
Yay.
Alderman Vaughn,
Nay.
Alderman Sistrunk,
Yay.
Alderman Parker,
Yay.
Alderman Corey,
Yay.
Alderman Dumas.
Yay.
Alderman Perkins.
Nay.
Five in favor with 2 against. This measure passes. The next matter on the agenda is the consideration of approval of P&Z item number CU 11-06. Mr. Griffith.
Mayor and Board, item CU 11-06 is a request by Bonds of Love Ministry for approval of a conditional use to allow a place of worship in a C2 general business zoning district. The property is located at 305 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Drive in Ward 5. The property is an existing building which formerly housed Precision Photo on less than a quarter of an acre. The proposed hours of services on Sunday will be 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. and Thursday evenings from 7 to 9 p.m. 18 property owners of record within 300 feet of the subject property were notified directly by mail of the request. A public hearing notice was published in the August 26th edition of the Starkville Daily News and a placard posted on the site concurrent with that notice. The planning office received only one inquiry from an adjacent property owner regarding the request, and it was included in the staff report, and it was asking about parking. Planning staff provided 3 conditions to consider if the conditional use was recommended for approval. There were no public comments received at the public hearing, and the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 4-1 to recommend approval of the request.
Discussion.
I've got one question.
Yes, sir.
Well, it may turn into more. What impact will this have on the 2 restaurants that are adjacent to it that currently are open and sell alcohol?
That there was some discussion about the impact that the church would have, and the restaurants would be able to remain open. They could continue to serve alcohol because they were already there and in operation.
What if there's a change in ownership in either one of them?
In ownership of the restaurants?
Of the restaurant.
My understanding is as long as it's in continual operation, that's a.
So as long as it maintains operation being, so it can change owners, but let's take the Thai restaurant, for example.
Right.
It's had 3 different restaurants in it in the last couple of years. If it changed restaurant types and owners, would that then not allow them to use and sell alcohol?
Or if they're out of service for a period of time.
That's.
The law is that non-conforming use would continue on so long as there's not a cessation of business for 6 months.
So as long as it is a restaurant and it is not closed for more than 6 months, they can maintain their ability to sell alcohol.
That lawful
And
non-conforming use would run with the land in that event.
Okay.
Now, that couldn't be expanded. That would be a trigger for a fresh look at it. But so long as it continues as a business in that building footprint, it goes forward.
Is there a footage between, you're alluding to the fact, you're saying, is there a footage you can't serve alcohol so many feet from a church?
Yeah, and I
A
think
place
it's
to work?
200 feet from the front door.
Are these that close?
250. 250. The Thai restaurant is for sure.
So your concern is if a restaurant were to close for more than 6 months, they wouldn't be able to serve alcohol?
They wouldn't be able to open and sell alcohol, that's correct.
Now, to expand on that a little bit, some of the discussion the Planning and Zoning Commission had was what impact that would have. I mean, that was an obvious one because it's right next door, but on other properties, within that, and we showed the locator map that kind of gave an idea of the radius.
Right.
And just what the properties were around. And I think one of the concerns the Planning and Zoning Commission members had was on the corner of 389 and 182, and that corner wasn't affected. The distance was okay. So that was one of the things that they discussed was what other properties would be impacted other than the ones that are right there. What potential others would be impacted.
Okay.
So there was some discussion about that.
So just to be clear, as long as the use stays the same and there's no longer than 6 months, they can maintain their ability to do what they do now.
Correct.
Now, so I guess any new business, though, that comes in will be unable to have that luxury within the radius of the, so if next to the Thai restaurant,
Without seeking a variance.
without seeking a variance. Okay. I have no further questions.
Alderman Vaughn,
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Mayor,
state your motion.
to approve the condition to use, request of the Bonds and Love Ministry to allow a place of worship at 305 Dr. Martin Luther King Drive with the full condition that are recommended by Planning and Zoning Commission.
Alderman Vaughn has made a motion to approve the conditional use request of Bonds of Love Ministry to allow a place of worship at 305 Dr. MLK Jr. Drive with 4 conditions as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Alderman Vaughn, is that your motion?
That's my motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Dumas. Alderman Vaughn, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter on the agenda is the request for approval of the City of Starkville Fire Department's claims docket.
Mayor, I'm gonna recuse myself.
All right, we'll give Alderman Carver a moment to exit the room.
Mr. Mayor, move approval, please.
Motion has been made by Alderman Perkins to approve of the City of Starkville Fire Department claims docket as of September 28, 2011. Alderman
That's my
Perkins, is that your motion?
Yes,
Do I hear a
sir.
second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Dumas. Alderman Perkins, you wish to speak on the matter?
I do not.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. Could someone go and beckon Alderman Carver? The next matter on the agenda is the request for approval of the City of Starkville claims docket for all departments except the fire department as of September 28, 2011. Discussion.
Move approval, Mr. Mayor.
Motion has been made by Alderman Perkins to approve of the City of Starkville claims docket for all departments except the fire department as of September 28, 2011. Alderman Perkins, that's your motion?
Yes, sir. Mr.
Do
Mayor.
I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Corey. Alderman Perkins, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter on the agenda is the request for authorization to advertise, I'm not reading the right language. Request for approval of Louisville Street widening and pedestrian project and authorization to advertise for bids, contingent upon approval or modification of the PS&E assembly from MDOT and contingent upon approval from MDOT to advertise. Mr. Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for that revision. I apologize for the late notice. That's something I got from MDOT late last week and was not input into the agenda in time. In your packet, you'll see a proposed plan, profile sheets for the roadway. Also, you'll see attached a detailed cost estimate. All of these items have been submitted to MDOT along with volumes of other documents and specifications. We are waiting on them to give us the final approval, which we hope will come hopefully very soon. And at that time, they will give us the authorization to advertise for bids. At that time, I wanted to go ahead and get this board's approval, so at that moment, we could go ahead and put it in the paper to advertise. As y'all know, we're under a deadline to spend these federal funds. We have to have a contract in place by the end of this year, end of calendar year. So we're still on track, but it's a very tight deadline, and we're just trying to save any time that we can. So we wanted to go ahead and get the board's authorization. I'll be happy to answer any questions about the plan, the estimate, or anything else related to the project.
Discussion.
We gonna be at a break ground next year?
I certainly hope so. Our plan is to have a contract in place December 31. Most likely, construction won't start till the weather breaks in the spring. And of course, all of this is dependent on favorable bids coming back. We're very hopeful, and we have a contingency built into these plans, but for whatever reason that goes way over, that'd be a decision this board needs to make, whether to proceed or not.
Further discussion.
So we've got one island built in?
We've actually got two. To add some green space in the center and try to break up that continuous turn lane throughout the entire length. As you've also noticed on the typical section, which I think is the third page in your packet, does include bike lanes and a sidewalk on one side. It's approved by the board. Those are small items compared to the overall plan of the project, but do provide those alternative modes of transportation, especially adjacent to the school and several neighborhoods there. So I think they'll be well utilized.
That's in my ward. Well, it actually divides my ward and a couple of other wards, and it is an area where people walk and use the street for non-automobile transportation.
I go down there a good bit in the afternoons going to the sportsplex, and quite a bit of walkers, so it's much needed. Much needed.
We have no motion pending.
Well, I move approval with the needed amendments. I don't know how best to say that. That's sufficient.
Alderman Dumas has moved approval of the Louisville Street widening project and pedestrian project as presented, and authorization to advertise for bids contingent upon approval or modifications of the PS&E assembly from MDOT and contingent upon approval from MDOT to advertise. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Sistrunk. Alderman Dumas, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter on the agenda is the request for authorization to correct grade classification for all existing positions of linemen with the Starkville Electric Department. Mr. Boyd?
Good evening, Mayor and Board. This item actually came to light as we were looking at the following two items. In the Starkville Electric Department, we currently have 4 individuals that are classified as linemen. One individual was promoted from apprentice lineman to lineman in July of 2001. This individual is shown in our salary grade 13. Another individual was promoted from apprentice lineman to lineman in November of 2002. And this person's file shows no references to the salary grade. A third individual was hired as a lineman in January of 2007. And his paperwork shows a salary grade of grade 15. And the fourth individual was hired as a lineman in January of 08. And his paperwork file shows a salary grade classification of grade 14. So we've got 4 individuals all performing the same work, the same functions, one at a grade 13, one at a grade 14, one at a grade 15, and one with no grade shown. Mr. Kemp and I have looked at this. We do not feel that there's any rational reason for there being differences in salary grades for these individuals. They are all performing the same function. We feel that the correct classification would be grade 14. And we're recommending that all of these individuals, their records be modified to reflect assignment to our salary grade 14, the lineman position being a salary grade 14. This will not involve any salary changes. It will put all of the individuals within the salary grade for grade 14. And we think that this is the appropriate classification for the position. And we would recommend this change at this time.
Mr. Mayor, may I be recognized?
You may.
Mr. Boyd, when did you become personnel officer for the city of Starkville?
In November of 07.
November of 07. Have you referred to the Stennis Institute report with regard to the grades for the position of lineman?
I am aware of it. I do not have a copy of that myself, Alderman Perkins. It was not in my office when I came on board.
So you're telling me, as a member of this board, there's an official hired personnel officer for the city of Starkville. You do not have a copy of the board-approved Stennis report?
That's correct. I do not.
Well, if you don't have a copy of the Stennis report, what evidence do you have to establish that the grades for the lineman is incorrect? What evidence, if you don't have the Stennis report, because you can't tell us what's in the Stennis report, because you've been personnel officer for at least 4 years, and so you're telling us that the grade for the lineman is incorrect. So what is your evidence? What's your evidence that that is incorrect?
The fact that there are 4 individuals that are classified in 3 different grades and 1 individual with no grade classification. That's what we're basing our recommendation on.
Well, if I tell you that the Stennis report has these linemen at a grade 11, do you have any evidence to dispute that?
I do not at this point, Alderman Perkins.
And I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I'm just trying to make sure we have the right information to make these important decisions that you bring to this board, nothing personal. So what I want to know, and I'm not satisfied, Mr. Boyd, as to there being incorrect information. Now, if you have not, you're the personnel officer, and you have not looked at the Stennis report, then you don't know whether it's correct or not. Now, don't you agree with me that the Stennis report is the mechanism, the document, and the official vehicle that delineates the grades for these employment positions?
Yes, sir, I would agree with that, but I'm not aware of anything that would have the same classification and multiple grades within the same department.
What I'm saying is, and I got a few questions here I want to answer to the mayor when I get finished, but what I'm saying is, if you're going to bring a recommendation, no disrespect here, if you're going to bring a recommendation to the mayor and the board that something is incorrect, you need to have something official to base that upon. Now, you're bringing us these 4 positions, and you have looked at the Stennis report, and you've been the personnel officer for 4 years. It seemed to me that you would have an official report to make and compare whether this information is correct or not, so we can make an informed decision. Because if I didn't ask these questions, then no telling where this matter would lead to. Now, my next question to you is, in a broader spectrum, have you done any investigation in the city to see whether any other positions may have an incorrect grade?
We have another item that is
I understand about the other item on the agenda.
on the agenda.
Okay, we'll cross to that. What about any other items on this?
I'm not aware of any others, Alderman Perkins.
Okay, Mr. Boyd, don't you agree with me that to properly, and of course, nothing personal, no agenda, I'm not here for all that. I'm here for the best interest of the city. When you agree with me that it would, that the Stennis report set out the grades that the city should follow, or that's currently in force and effect?
It's my understanding that it did, yes. And
And I don't have the Stennis report with me. It's not my job to keep up with it. But let's say that the Stennis report says a grade 11, then, and you're telling us to go ahead and tonight, you don't even have a Stennis report, been with the city for 4 years, and you're telling us that it's incorrect. So let's say that the Stennis report says it's a grade 11. So would these grades for alignment then be incorrect if the Stennis report says it's a grade 11?
I have tried to rely on what was done in the past, Alderman Perkins.
Is it difficult?
If you would like for me to research this as far as the Stennis report, we can do that. And I can
Okay,
bring it back to you.
One other question, is it difficult for you to get a copy of the Stennis report as official personnel officer for the city staff to do your job?
I should be able to obtain that.
Mr. Mayor and Board, I'm gonna make a motion that we table this, and nothing personal here, but we need to be, and I've said this before, whoever works for the city, whether it's a person on sanitation, public services, fire department, police, engineer, work for Ms. Spruill, information technology, whatever department it is, when you come before this mayor and board, and no disrespect, I'm just talking general, I'm not talking to any one person, you need to be prepared. If you don't have the information to do your job, get the information to do your job. Specifically, we are being asked to make a motion to correct the grade of lineman for the electric department because they're incorrect. Now, there has been no evidence presented to us tonight to say that the grades are incorrect. We have just heard the testimony of our official personnel officer who has stated that he has been with the city of Starkville since 2007 and does not even have a Stennis Institute report. And he further states that the Stennis Institute report is the report that reflects the grade that the position can be in. But yet, he does not have that. He does not present that to us, but yet does not have any evidence of any kind for us to make a motion, approve it, and change the grades to a grade 14. Now, I don't know what's in it. The Stennis may say 14, but I think we need to Ms. Spruill, when these matters come before the board, the staff needs to be prepared. And this is not an indication of full preparation. So what I suggest is that we table this matter until we can get further information, and it may say 14, Mr. Boyd, and you know, but I don't have that evidence tonight, and I don't think, I'm just simply saying, no disrespect, it just have that information for us in the future so we'll really know. And I want to get ahead of the agenda, and the same thing hopefully would apply for the matter from public services. But Mr. Mayor, I move that this matter be tabled until such time that the city personnel officer can bring us information to this board that would serve as proof and evidence that these grades are currently incorrect. That's my motion.
Alderman Perkins has moved to table the pending matter. Alderman Perkins, that's your motion?
Yes, sir, for those reasons.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
All right, I have 6 in favor and 1 against. Is that correct? Is there anyone else? Two against. All right, wait, that makes the math interesting, yeah. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Keep them up. All right, I have 4 in favor. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand. All right. And all the abstentions, please signify by raising your hand. By a vote of 4 in favor, 2 against, with 1 abstention, this measure passes. Simple majority required. All right, that will carry us to a request for authorization to promote Brad Scarborough from apprentice lineman to lineman in the electric department.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
the only thing about the next 2 items, if it's not no urgency, because if we advertise to promote the person, the grade is not clear. So
I don't think we can act on those 2 without
Right.
resolving this prior matter, so.
All right, without objection, upon the advice of the personnel officer, I'm going to rule the next 2 matters dilatory as they were dependent on the first matter. Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none. The next matter on the agenda is
item number 10.
the request for approval to correct the salary grade indication for our 3 existing line foremen in the water department due to a clerical error dating back to February 6, 2007. Mr. Boyd?
This is one, and I do have a chart that was on file in the office regarding positions in the public services area. And that chart shows it is not the Stennis report, but it is a chart that was handed down through the files. But it shows the various positions in the public services department, and it shows our foreman position in grade 9 and the general foreman in grade 10. In February of '07, a matter came before the board and asked that the line foreman be moved to a grade 10, step 4B. And I feel that was an error, that it should have been a grade 9, where the other foreman positions are shown on the rate chart, not a grade 10 where the lead foreman is. And we would like to correct that. This is coming through consultation with Mr. Devlin also.
Mr. Mayor, might be recognized.
You may.
Mr. Boyd, I want to make sure I understand this. So you're saying this situation is distinguishable from the last one?
I feel that it is, because I do have a salary chart that was prepared by Mr. Young, John Young, that was given down to Mr. Devlin, and a copy was in my office. that lists the various job classifications within the public service department.
Okay, to make sure we're completely consistent here with the last motion, how can you just affirmatively state that 100%?